So good evening. Tonight is the December 20th, 2023 Finance Board meeting. We will call to order at 6:11 p.m. The first item on the agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes from the November 15th, 2023 meeting.
I read them, move to approve the minutes from the November 15th, 2023 meeting.
And I can second that. We do have one member who is remote, so all votes will be taken by roll call. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay. All right, so we'll go through the roll call. Alex,
Here?
for the minutes,
Yeah, they're good.
they're good, okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ruth and Melissa, yes, that's unanimous. So the second item on the agenda is the website update. Rebecca had reached out to me in advance of the budget season, looking to kind of have the finance board meeting website kind of be the homepage for the budget documents, and she asked me if there was anything else we wanted to have included on our page, and if we wanted to make any changes. So I kind of went through and I looked around at some other finance board pages from various towns and neighboring communities. And I think I can hear myself, Bill. I just kind of put together a quick blurb about and Alex, I can forward this to you.
Okay.
And you can provide any feedback. But just a very quick blurb about the finance board, the number of members, what we're responsible for in terms of reviewing the financial affairs of the town, reviewing the articles in the warrants, making recommendations on them, presenting the annual budget to both the Board of Selectmen and the town, authorizing year-end budget line item transfers, and authorizing transfers from the reserve fund. And then just kind of having out like a general, how often we meet, where we meet, how people can see our meetings, just so that it's there, including the members, our roles, our terms. And then I also, a couple of neighboring communities also kind of put in like if we're on other committees, so we can see how we're interacting with other, groups within the town. That's kind of like my big thing. And then like I noticed there, a lot of people have links to like the annual reports, the budgets, like the generic things that we're involved in. So I didn't know if anyone else had any thought about what they would like to see on the website, links to other entities, other organizations. We can also kind of take this back and think about it. It's not something that we have to decide today, but just to give, a little bit more oomph to our page than what's there. Yeah.
I wonder if any of the past letters to town meeting to be able to, I mean, that's already on the website, so I don't want to duplicate it, but it is an effort. It speaks to who we are and the work that we do. So
Even if we have like a link, like links to wherever those are currently stored, which are the documents page.
and I would love to have some sort of a friendly public outreach encouraging membership to, or membership, assignment, however we're gonna call it, recruiting to.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about that, no experience necessary kind of thing.
The importance of the role.
The importance of the role and the need for participation.
Right, no, I would agree. You know, as we come up to budget season, we have, you know, not a lot of room if people can't make the meetings. And missing a meeting and not having quorum would throw the whole kind of plan for budget season out the window. So obviously, I've talked to Rebecca. She has no problem with me kind of putting something out on, you know, the local Facebook pages looking for people to volunteer. I know I've directed people to the town website for, people looking to volunteer, to give them opportunities to see where they can volunteer within the town, so.
Anything we can do, people, you know, if you live in this town, you have skin in the game. And we need more people, like I said, we're so tight on the quorum. With cold and flu season coming up. 2 people get a cold. We don't have a meeting,
Right,
so it's important that we get out.
I would agree. Alex, do you have anything you would like to see on the website or? Maybe to- We can circle back on that too. I think just like some generic information like I gave you would be nice to see. The next item on the agenda was brought up at the meeting in November, but at the time it was decided to wait until this meeting.
Yeah.
So as part of the regional school district agreement review, one of the items that's in discussion is formalizing the finance advisory committee. And that committee would consist of members of each of the 3 communities, the town administrator or finance director, a member from the Board of Selectmen, as well as a member from the finance committee. So I know from the Board of Selectmen, Selectman Castronellis was appointed to serve in this capacity. I know they've already had 1 meeting. And so she had reached out to me just to make sure we were going to have someone serve in that capacity.
How often do they meet?
There's not a set meeting schedule as of right now.
Just once a month?
I know,
My understanding was that they had assumed that they would only meet once or twice in order to get through the proposed amendments for the upcoming agreement, and then it will be more formalized as part of that agreement, and then next year, when it would take effect, so to speak, that's when it will start to be a little bit more frequent, but if anything, it was only going to be the 2 meetings a year, one being in the fall, one being in the winter, and that was more of a group dynamic, not necessarily the advisory committee. So I think it's on an as needed basis, other than those 2 set in stone meetings. I think, based upon what I understand right now.
good. So I know we said we'll talk about it. I don't know if anyone has an interest in it. Sure. Okay,
Why not? Sounds like fun.
all right. So then I will make the motion to recommend that Bill O'Neill be added as our committee member. Is there a second? First and a second. Any discussion, Alex?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay, so then we'll do a roll call vote. Alex,
Yes.
Bill,
No, just in case I make a mess of it.
Did you actually vote no?
Yeah, is that like a formal vote?
yes,
I'll vote yes.
Okay.
I'll vote yes.
and I will vote yes, and that is also unanimous. Thank you, Beth.
My pleasure.
The next item on the budget is, on the agenda is the fiscal year 24 budget update for November. I distributed the reports that came from Ellen. And I know that when you sent these out, there was no items of significant concern. There was one account where it looked like it was spending ahead, but you said you got a new paper supplier and that should help bring that account back.
Yes, we put a few furniture pieces there that we didn't usually buy, so it makes sense that it was ahead, and I think it did come in a little under last year. So. Myself, Rebecca, and Steve, none of us are concerned with the accounts, but still be fine.
And so we're now almost halfway through. I feel like we're halfway through, but still one more month before we're halfway through. So.
Was the easy half.
Yeah, and this is only through the end of November, so.
Yes. But 5 months.
Like 12.
Before we move on, does anyone have anything else on that item? Nope. Okay. The next item on the agenda under the fiscal year 25 budget update is the cost of living adjustment. I know, Rebecca, you brought this up at the last meeting again. We decided to wait to have a larger discussion about it until today. I know historically, we've gone with a 2% increase. I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that we are subjected to a 2.5% limit in terms of what we can raise our taxes. And I know if I've gone out and done some research about what some other like organizations like Social Security, Mass Teacher Retirement, where they're projecting their cost of living adjustments, and you know, right now, currently, they're looking at like 3%. But we have a limit as to how we can raise our taxes, and I don't think we can have that capability of doing a 3% increase or a 2.5% increase, because then that would mean we would need everything to come in at that amount.
With no
With no,
initiatives.
right, no other way of gaining revenue or, you know, or having to cut expenses in other places.
Yeah, I mean, my only, yes, the only reason that I again brought it up is because, again, we had talked about how the cost of living is not 2% in the real world, and how, you know, for me, it was more so process and structure, because we may have had the wage classification study, and we may have used the survey data as we went through and tried to bring the majority of our employees up to a level of meeting the median area, the median salary, median salary for that position, comparable position in community. But we never adopted the classification study, so we never adopted the grades, we never adopted any of the structure and or what really creates like how we evaluate our employees. So we still have our performance evaluations that we just started to do this year. So there's really still no process for individuals to come forward and receive more than a cost of living increase that's being proposed. So I guess it was a twofold kind of, you know, issue. Like, one is like, when we move forward, are we just applying a cost of living increase to salaries across the board? And are we taking anybody beyond that, and how are we doing that? And two, when we talk about a cost of living increase, is that when it starts at 2%, and we'll evaluate the revenue, we evaluate the economic situation that we find ourselves in, and then make that determination. So it's more so for me about what the finance board wants to do in terms of structure moving forward, so that I can then direct the departments a little bit more clearly, because I think that this year it was nice we locked the salary cells like in the ClearGov model so that they couldn't increase them beyond, because sometimes when they have the ability to submit numbers, it alters our figures substantially. And then we have to back into how do we get a balanced budget? And so not allowing them to go beyond that 2% without having those conversations is important, but now there's questions as to what does that look like? How do we advocate for ourselves? What do you mean? Like, and so I'm just kind of trying to find that better structure as to what direction you would like me to provide to the departments so that your conversation with them isn't, you know, argumentative or, you know, accusatory of any sort or anything like that, just so it's, you know, sets the stage and understanding that, you know, different years come with different challenges. So I guess when I brought it up the first time, I didn't do it in a more clear way of trying to get what I needed from the board, which was again, your guidance and feedback as to how you would like me to proceed with that type of development with COLA and increases in salaries beyond what COLA is being offered to other employees.
So I guess, you know, my personal perspective and, you know, is, you know, someone who is, you know, if you're doing performance reviews and someone is meeting expectations and they're doing what they need to do, you know, that's great. But then if you have someone who is exceeding those expectations and going above and beyond, then those are the people where there's that opportunity, because again, you want to reward,
and
retain
those top
the top
talents.
talent, yeah.
So they don't migrate to other places and take those talents and skills and knowledge base that they gain here somewhere else. And leverage that somewhere else instead of leveraging here. The problem you face is, you know, we're stuck in this pattern of everybody was spreading the peanut butter across the bread evenly. And it's in the real world, it's not how it works. Some people are super performers. Some people aren't. I mean, you see it in sports world, right? That's why, you know, James, Mookie Betts gets a lot of money and particularly or whatever it is, he doesn't get much money, right? Because one's so much better. How do you figure that out without performance reviews and without the personal and the politics getting intertwined in that? Because it's very difficult in a small town like we are, where a lot of the employees actually live in the town as well. So there's another dynamic there that really is difficult, you know, to overcome sometimes. People take it personal and it's really not. You know? I love everybody to death, but fact is, and I've said it 1,000 times, we don't make cheeseburgers. We can't just go out and raise the price of our cheeseburgers and pay it to our employees. We're confined by law to what we can raise above what we did last year to 2.5%. And exceed, you know, with the expectation of any growth we have in the city or the town, that's our pocketbook. And, you know, it's tough sometimes that you have to make these tough decisions. And sometimes we lose good people and it's a shame. But I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to find, you know, gold in the backyard when it just doesn't exist. I mean, we talk about, I've heard it for a couple of years, we're gonna sell Strawberry Field, we're gonna make a lot of money. Will that be in my lifetime or, you know, my grandchildren's lifetime? When? I don't know if that's a realistic expectation at this point. You know, what can we realistically do? That's the question, and then solve the equation from there.
Yeah, I think the only thing it becomes a little bit more challenging is that I think when we talk about performance evaluation, that's a crucial way to evaluate employee performance and evaluation with other communities and whether or not there's additional money. But the way that Groveland is structured is that performance evaluations are not all done by one person. So you're not really getting that structure because you have like the performance evaluation for the library director is the trustees. The performance evaluation for the COA director is the COA board. Or, so there's different people who are performing the performance evaluations of the employees, so when you take a look at, you know, how they're evaluated, like, as a whole, and it becomes a little bit more challenging, so it's more of that, like, other structure, so my goal is to move away from the way that it's been done historically, is people showing up to the finance board with their own salary study, asking for more money and advocating for themselves, and doing a more, you know, data-driven, performance evaluation-based type request for those increases, and understanding that one department is not more important than another department, and how we structure that moving forward. So that's my goal. So I agree with what we're kind of saying, we're talking about, but I just want to figure out what that looks like. And I'm just not entirely sure either what that looks like, because as the appointing authority, those individuals have the ability to critique their person. So it's not as though I want to centralize it, but how do you kind of make that work too at the same time? Because obviously they're gonna think their people are the best, which they
That's
should.
what I was just gonna say, and the natural tendency is to say, yeah, you wanna advocate for your own group, why would you not? Right. But, and then that needs to be applied fairly across the whole organization, so that becomes a challenge. Again, I feel like we made a huge leap forward this fiscal year with the salary study. I wonder, and I know we had to pay for that, but do they give guidance? Does the Collins Center give guidance as to how you carry this forward over time so that it's not as one point in time, so that it can be managed?
It goes back to the classification and the grades and how you do that, and whether or not you do step increases and where they fall within the grades and how they get moved up. So they did mention it in their classification study that we didn't necessarily adopt, because there wasn't really much substance to it. It was really just basic because we didn't have anything to start with. So one of my goals actually is to move forward and see if I can get another community compact grant to see if we can take that a little bit further and get a little bit more detailed in what the structure would be. But I just, again, wanted to be in the forefront because I do know that there's a couple of individuals that will be coming before you that are not pleased with the 2%, and that will guide the conversation moving forward. So I just want the board to have an approach that you can all agree on, so that it is fair to all the employees who took their 2% and did not have an issue moving forward, or, you know, follow directions that were given originally by the board. So again, it was more so just a general conversation, no decision necessarily to be made, as much as just understanding that, you know, conversation is.
In terms of the performance reviews, is everyone using like a standard form?
Yes,
Because that's obviously the first key to anything, is being evaluated on similar criteria. And then, you know, like I said, we don't have the same capabilities of just going out and being like, okay, our wages are increasing 5%, so let's raise our prices next year. So I think it's going to be a work in process while we start to formalize some of these aspects, and it's not going to be you know, everyone's exactly happy the first year right out the gate. Again, there's limitations. But I think as long as we continue to make steps to ensure that we're doing things fairly across the board, I think that is the most important part of it. And by, you know, locking the salaries when they were putting their budgets together, that's done fairly. That's not like, oh, this department can come in and say, I'm getting this much, and this department comes in and says, you know. And, you know, they obviously can advocate for themselves when they're meeting with us. But again, a lot of it comes down to, this is the pool of money that we have.
I think everybody, I mean, in any organization, there is, you advocate for yourself, it's a discussion, but the management says, this is what we have and this is how we can make it work. And this is the range that we're looking at. I I'm
Yeah.
not aware of organizations where,
But I do understand the high performer, the
That too.
average employee, the lower performer. And, you know, people have the ability to reward based on performance. You know, but usually in those, those situations, there's a compensation team that's actually looking at everybody as a whole. And we don't, to Rebecca's point, we don't have that right now.
and that might be where a contract and a step comes into play.
Right.
And, because performance might lead to responsibility, which might lead to a step in the contract, and that might lead to a salary growth that's a little bit more defined.
So I have a question. Maybe this has already been talked about, but is it feasible to provide a 2% just cost of living across departments and employees, or is that out of the question? Because what I was thinking is you give a cost of living adjustment to folks' salaries, whether it be 1%, 2%, whatever's decided upon. And then you have a pot of money that's left over. And then that's with that pot of money, it's a finite amount. Then you start having conversations about the high performers in each department. And then that pot of money is then distributed to those high performers for, a merit increase. So that way, your confines, how much you have. 2% cost of living adjustment goes to those employees, and then the remainder would go to any high performers. So that way you don't run the risk of, spending more than what you have.
Yeah. I think the challenge with that, if you can hear me okay, Alex, the challenge with that is back to the fact that there's not one person or one entity that oversees all of these different people, there's boards that oversee certain departments, so it's just, maybe we could get to that point. We would have to really think through how we could do that equitably.
Then maybe you could put the onus on the department head and be like, hey, I'm just going to use this as an example, be like, okay, chief of police, this is how much money can allocate to the PD for folks that you believe are high performers. And this is, you take whatever we have, divide it to the departments, and then leave it up to the chief, who knows the performance of all their individuals, all of his police officers the best, give him the ability to delegate or allocate that extra high performer money to the police officers that he thinks deserve it. So that way it kind of relieves us of the onus of allocating it and gives it to like that department's head to say, okay, well, this police officer, he gets his 2% increase like everyone else, but he gets an extra 2%.
Yeah, I've been at places like that where I was given a pool of money. And I can distribute that to my staff as I, saw fit. Certain employees got 3, others got 7.
Yeah.
But I had to stay within, everything when it added up, it had to stay within that,
Right.
money I had.
Yeah, and then that way we don't have to worry about allocating the money. It's up to the heads of the department. So he can do all the performance reviews of all his officers. He knows the high performers. All of his folks get the 2% increase. But he has an extra $100 in his back pocket that he can, award to the officers that he thinks deserve it. No, that's one way of potentially approaching it.
How many employees do we have that are not in the contract? Because I know all the police are contract, water sewers contract, highways contract, so they're locked in. There's no,
Dispatcher is your contract, the police chief, the fire chief, and myself are all contract employees.
okay, so that doesn't leave really a lot left, is there?
Everyone in town hall, everyone at the library, the administrative staff of water and sewer, the administrative staff of highway,
Electric is on their own.
electric is on their own.
Part of the thing is, we have departments with one person,
Yes.
so. It's difficult too.
Do they report to do they report to themselves or like, are they their own boss pretty much?
Then no, they report to a board, they might report to the select board, they might
They might report to the
health, Board of
voters.
Health, they might report to the, yeah. I mean, it's all over the place, Alex.
Yeah,
And the Board of Health has what? 2 employees, 3,
They have 3 employees.
and they're governed by the Board of Health.
It was just something to discuss and think
Yeah.
about. I
Yeah.
can do some more due diligence on my part and working with the Collins Center. And then, not necessarily for this year, but maybe something that we talk about more so over the summer about how we would like to kind of structure that. So just to get it out there, as we tried something new this year with the locking of the salaries and whatnot, that we're all on the same page, that's
Mhm.
something that we're exploring and looking.
And how similar towns of our size with our staff, how they handle it. Well, because they must have the same growth issues
It's
we
one
have.
struggle, right? If we could give department heads
A pool of money.
3 to 7% to allocate how they feel and make everybody kind of happy, that'd be great. But we have a 2.5% increase, so it becomes complicated.
yeah, I think it's just trying to remove us from the politics.
Yes,
What is
Yeah.
that?
the politics, that was one of the first ones I
It's
brought up.
basically saying, who knows their folks the best? Fire chief knows his firemen, police knows his police department. Let them award, or let, the heads award their officers and firemen with the extra money that they, deserve based on their performance. And then the rest of the folks get 2%. I'm just trying to think of ways to avoid going over and, just having this kind of like an automated process. This is what we do at work. It's, we're a service line, obviously different beast. They're given, our MDs and partners are given a pot of money and they're like, hey, this is what you get. You allocate it to who you think is best.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to, go through the process with the 2% increase flat.
Yeah.
To everyone, and then when we get to the end of the process and we see what is left for revenue that's not allocated, whether there's a pool of money that we can then in turn allocate,
To some of these
to-
other, but right now,
But-
we have a big wild card,
right,
and that's, we don't know what the school budget is. Right now, it runs about 64.7% of every dollar we take in. Does it go up to 66 cents? Then we're even shorter. Does it go down to 63 where we get a little breathing? I don't know. We won't know that for a couple of months, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying, it's like, it's hard for us to say, like, before we even get to the budget,
What's left over?
what's left over. It would
What's
have,
short?
like, it would be like, we go through again with everyone assuming the 2% of the living adjustment. And then you like evaluate it at the end, if there's any money left over that we haven't allocated, that we come, that we're, okay, this can be given out as high performer, or however you want to approach it. But again, that would require us establishing some sort of policy and procedure, but okay, so now there's this pool of money, how do you then allocate it to departments? Do you have a compensation team where it's all the department heads meet and they as a group, decide how it gets allocated to the highest perform, that's the part that we don't have the ability to
Predict.
say today,
Yeah, you don't want to
This is
make
how you
promises
do
you
it.
can't keep.
right? And that's why locking in the salary at 2% when someone feels like, oh, well, my staff should have a 4% raise. Well, I can see why it's like, I want to be able to change that. It's,
I had it my way, but he got a 10%.
but
They're gonna change the law in Massachusetts to do that, and see that happen.
Again, it goes back to the fact that we're just restricted as to what we can do out of the,
Right.
out of the gate.
Like Mr. Scanlon says, it was well intentioned, but not very well. ended up.
I think,
Sorry, we don't have a,
It was
Slam
again,
dunk.
something I didn't necessarily
I know.
expect an answer to right
Yeah.
away, just
but
something
it
that.
should be on.
it's
the
something
table.
we should continue.
We keep referencing the Collins, we keep referencing their report, but we never really adopted much of that. We just used the survey as a way of numbers with comparable communities that we felt confident in, that came from a third party, not an employee, comparing themselves to others. They gave us a better rounded understanding of where they should be financially compared to other positions. So when we keep on saying the Collins, the wage study, all this other stuff, I think there's a lot of confusion as to what we have for structure in place. So now almost our words are being used against us. So I'm just trying to like get us set up so that we understand what we approved what we did as a town and what we plan to do moving forward, because I think the whole ultimate plan of moving in that direction entirely anyway was to create that structure that we're talking about now. We just didn't get to that final point yet. And
Yeah,
That's
no, I
all
think,
fair.
yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that's the approach that, ultimately we would be taking. Like, the first step was to make sure people were getting,
And let's be honest, that was a big, huge first step.
it was a huge first step. And we did it because, again, we want to retain our employees. We want to make sure they're getting paid a fair wage compared to comparable communities, because we don't want them.
Right.
But it's a process to get from point A to point B, where you have a
Singing to the choir.
clearly defined step. So the first step was, let's get everyone to that median wage, and now that next step is, how do we develop
Process
a
system.
process? So I think, reaching out, and, figuring out like how to get that. Whether it be like the wage classification and the steps and whatever, however we want to refer to it. That would be the next step. And again, like, if you need some type of compensation team, well, then who makes that team? So. Okay. Does anyone have anything else on that? No. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the capital improvement plan, which I distributed to everybody. And it was reviewed by the Board of Selectmen on Monday. I don't know if you just want to give an update in terms of what their final decision was as the capital committee.
yes, they are the default capital improvement committee because we don't have any members on the committee as established. So what I did this year was I took a little bit more of a comprehensive approach. The first year was trying to get a lot of the inventory together and understanding exactly what we had. This year I tried to focus a lot on what the funding opportunities that we had in place in order to make these capital projects a reality, or how we would strategize a way in which to make these projects a reality. So it's a little bit more writing and a little bit more information that you're typically used to seeing. There also includes a little bit of analysis when we go through exactly how we've been utilizing the funding for capital improvement projects currently. So it goes into a little bit about the way that we've been using our reserve funds. It talks a little bit about the way that we've been successful in achieving grant monies to move these initiatives forwards. It talks about CPA funds and how CPA funds can actually help towards capital improvement projects when they fit into the categories. And we talked about the ARPA spending that we received and how that has been distributed thus far, and how we propose to move that forward. So for fiscal year 25, we took a look at what was submitted, which was an additional 6 projects that had not necessarily been on the capital plan last fiscal year. And we took a look at what we had for available money that we could allocate towards making those happen, and we weighed the priorities of the department based upon what they were projecting for need. The value of or the asset value of what they were requesting, the useful life, et cetera, et cetera. And we put forward the projects as follows. We put forward funding for the cruiser for the police department, a public safety generator, the fire command vehicle, the electrical replacement at town hall. That's just a study to look at the electrical panels. If you hadn't already heard from the board of selectmen, the panels are outdated. They no longer make the parts for them. So we have to do an overhaul, and that's not just at town hall, it's also at the public safety building in the library. There's a library shelving replacement project. That project is actually stretched out over 5 years. It's not just 1 year. And then there's the highway garage replacement project. So the total project expenditures was 378,419 just for fiscal year 25. The plan was not to go out for any additional debt at the current time with the interest rates as high as they are, and based upon the understanding that we have with the Kentucky middle school, high school. While we are going to be seeing our short-term bans fall off this year, which is great, we're still not at the ideal levels for the financial policy that we had discussed the last time when I made the presentation. So given a lot of those circumstances and the quick turnaround and with the unknowns of the potential Whittier School building project, we felt as though it would be the best time to get move forward with any bonding. So the funding sources that we had allocated for those particular projects was free cash, ARPA, the proceeds sale of buildings, bond premiums for projects that had a 20-year life, and then bond premiums that projects that had at least a 5-year life. So for the free cash allocation, we were just looking at funding $149,000, and that's just the Mark Cruiser, as we had done historically every year as part of their fleet management and how they cycle through. And then $84,000 for the public safety generator, but yet another $2,000 of that project coming from ARPA. And then the other ARPA funds, the ones that had already been allocated, as we discussed at the last meeting, with the fire command vehicle, and it was for $63,000. And then we proposed using $25,000 for the electrical replacement and $20,000 for the library shelving replacement. For the highway garage replacement, we were looking at utilizing $89,000 of the proceeds sale of buildings and the $41,000 for bond premiums for an item with a life of 20 years. Additionally, sorry, I forgot, for the public safety generator, we were looking at using about $3,000 of the bond premiums for probably 5 years.
What building is being sold?
So that was something that was sold. It was the old town hall building up in Gardner School. The white building in the corner.
Oh. So that was money that
Has been sitting there,
has been sitting there, so that, and just hadn't been,
utilized, and you can only use it for a capital project of that nature. Or I think also to purchase a new building or something.
so this is a garage. The highway garage?
So when you go into the highway garage, it's like a metal steel building and it's like on a slab. And so like the photos in the report, you'll see that it's all rusted underneath and it's not large enough to take care of all of the new equipment that we purchased with ARPA. And that, you know, our highway foreman has done an excellent job maintaining all the equipment in that garage himself too, with all of his tools and all the other things that we have in there. So this would expand the footprint slightly, and it would still be that shell of a building that's just like a metal, like, you know, building that's placed over that, that's slightly larger. So it's not a huge expense, but it's a little larger than, you know, some of our other capital expenditure.
But seems reasonable to protect the investment.
Essentially, yeah, and that's kind of what it was when I did the walkthrough. They've done a lot with like the salt shed and the, you know, making additional loft shelving, and they've really been useful in terms of doing a lot of the stuff in-house, but that building itself is like, it's not holding salt, it's holding the laborers when they're in there working or, you know, getting the cars ready.
Is this by the town yard? Is this on?
It's in the town yard.
In the 10 yard.
Yeah, you go through the gate and it's literally the first building on the right. I mean, the left, excuse me.
And then what projects were there projects or capital requests that were either pushed or,
So the following page on the plan gives you the entire fiscal year 2025 to 2039. That's not right. But I'll change that date. But that plan gives you all of the projects that were, that we have that have been requested and they were funding. The one thing I forgot to mention is that the, you may have heard on the Board of Selectmen, we had monies come back to us from, or monies available to us from the borrowing for the middle high school.
Yeah.
And it's about $130,000 of money that can be used for our elementary school. So when I sat down with Jonathan Seymour and Bob Danforth, the facilities individuals for Kentucky, they had said that they believe that the priority at this point in time was the parking lot and sidewalk connection into the school and needing to be upgraded. So they had proposed utilizing those funds for that project. And that fit the terms of the borrowing and of the current debt that's where the money had come from the school project. And therefore, the school said that we would be able to utilize the funds for the project.
and that would be what the school, that would be the capital request for the school for this year. There won't be others. What about the classroom? Year or something, you probably were.
We do know, maybe having the abatement, the tiles.
So the asbestos would not meet the parameters of the bond
Because it has to go towards,
because it doesn't have a life, like a shelf life. You're just getting rid of asbestos.
Where's the sidewalk?
Going into the school
From where?
from School Street. So there's a sign that's on when you come in, and the sign's on your left, and there's a sidewalk that comes down, and then it like starts to break, and then it like comes into the opening, and then there's like a little island, and then starts to break again, and then it comes into the other sidewalk that loops around where there's the fire.
Mhm.
Fire. So it would only be that first portion, it wouldn't be the entire, because there's a lot of work was done in the back and with the fields and everything over there.
Yep, I'm out of the vision.
I mean, there was conversations about whether or not they wanted to do any of the other projects, that had been listed on the list, and they listed that as a priority and that they would like to see put forward sooner rather than later. When looking at like they provided a list, if you look at the bottom, it's one of the attachments, but they have like a numbered system that they provided that listed their priorities. And I did also include all of the departments' requests in the appendix so that you can see exactly what their reasoning was.
Should pay the very last. Okay,
And so I asked them the priority 1 to 3, and their priority 1 to 3 was the grounds in the field. And then there's the $200,000 one, which obviously we don't have enough money for, and we will not be able to allocate the additional $100,000 to move forward with either one of those two other items. So given the monies available and the need that they've established, that is what they had chosen to move forward.
so we're still dealing with the lead in the water.
So we did get the water filter, the drinking fountains. But we did not get the lead from the pipes removed. So essentially what we did is that we tapped into the water line that came from the addition, which did not use the solder and the piping. So they were able to utilize that connection and put in the fountains. So we do have lead-free drinking water. But the fixtures themselves that connect to the existing water fountains that have been shut off in the individual classrooms and whatnot, and the toilets and whatnot, those still have the same system. It's still feeding, and they just didn't think that it warranted a $400,000 fix for something that's not being utilized as drinking water to be clean as drinking water. So I think the only ones that came through this year that we didn't look at funding, if you look at that main list, is that the highway superintendent asked for a new vehicle. For this fiscal year, and given the fact that the board was moving forward with the purchase of the vehicle for the command vehicle, and was not going to be looking at a vehicle in the next fiscal year, I figured that there was a priority there, so that was moved. The highway department had also requested the track loader in the clam shovel catch basin cleaner for this fiscal year as well, and both of those were not funded. One of the reasons that the determination on those two trucks were made was because we just made a substantial investment in about 4 new vehicles for the highway department with the ARPA funding. And one of my concerns is that when you start to do replacement vehicles and you lump them together, what happens is that they all need to be replaced together.
Same time.
And I wanted to make sure that they were kind of spread out a little bit, so given the fact that I know one of those machinery pieces of equipment are shared with the water and sewer, I believe it's the backhoe. I still felt as though having the new trackless and having the new swap loader, those two would be okay for now, and then maybe the next fiscal year, if we have money available, we could look at one vehicle. And then the next fiscal year, look at another, but again, I didn't want to group them because I get very nervous about having to own that all together.
Replace them all at the same time. Okay.
So those were the only ones that came in that were new, that were requested for funding for FY 25, and they got pushed off. Everything else was on the list before. And that being like the all-terrain vehicle, we tried to use CPC funds to match it with a grant. We were unsuccessful with the grant, so then it just left onto the list. The central fire station doors are still an issue. It's not necessarily a pressing issue, so you'll see that's pushed out. The roof is the big thing that we were looking at trying to replace this year, because of the bands coming off this year, we wanted to see if we could potentially level fund the debt, so it's not necessarily increasing it, but just carrying it through. But given all of the additional costs, and again, the interest rates and trying to get everything turned around and carry it through just at the right amount, it just didn't look like something we could do, so that's something that's still a priority. And then the other larger items that were on there, like we said, the Salem Street dam, that's another thing I'm trying to get people to understand, like, you know, capital improvement projects aren't just vehicles, they're not just equipment. Capital improvement projects extend well beyond that, and we can take into consideration our infrastructure and start to include that in our plan, so that, you know, when things start to fail, like the Salem Street Dam, we're not like, oh, wait, we had no idea. It's like, no, this has been an item that's been on our capital plan. We've been searching for grants, or we've been searching for whatever, and we've been unsuccessful, and now we have an obligation to figure out how to fund it. And if that has to take priority over a piece of equipment or something else, then those are the types of decisions we're gonna have to start making. But you'll see now that we're putting infrastructure type projects on that as well. And everything from the school was the same as last year. They had no new projects or anything new that they had added.
You know, I was for the trails,
Yes.
to police the trails.
Mhm. And one of the things about
You get them
the,
electric bikes.
try and do that, they were talking more about stretchers and stuff like that, and getting people on beds if they need to get them off the trail. But the thing about the plan that I really want people to understand is that there are a variety of different ways to fund these projects. Like, just because they're on the capital plan, that means that you're approving that these are things that we need, or things that we need to like look into. That's not necessarily saying that the taxpayer has to pay for them on that operating budget, or we have to use free cash, or we have to go out for bonds. We can be creative with finding a Mass Works grant to fix a culvert, or finding a grant that will provide us the ATV as they've requested, or trying to look at different ways of funding these things. So I
So
want
it
people
puts
to,
it all into a central location to get it into everybody's radar, so that as you,
But even like as grants are announced to be available, you have an all-encompassing list that says, what could I use that grant for? And then you have the ability to, you have the information already to go. You don't have to go track it down and figure it out.
and it's been approved by the board, it's been approved by the town, it's been vetted by the process. So one, gives grant applications and other funding sources a little bit more weight, and two, this is the vision you've set forward. If there's another capital plan that you need to be focusing on, that the residents or another board or another department thinks, like, this is your way of doing that, because otherwise you're not gonna know what you need to advocate for without having that plan in motion. You can't just be like, oh, you need this today? Fine, I'll go find you that today. Oh, you need that tomorrow? Sure, why not? Like, it's gotta be something we can accomplish.
well, it gives order, it gives us the chance to anticipate things, because I feel like in the past, sometimes we get, you know, we need to do this now,
The 11th hour.
and we don't have any time to compare that to the other competing priorities, which is you get stuck to make a decision between alternatives that aren't.
Quick question, is there any money for like EV? Vehicles in grants? That maybe we can turn some of these combustion things into EVs and get money to pay for it, use OPMs.
No, I think that's a really good idea. That's something that we've been talking about with the police department, because I know a couple of the other communities have been using a hybrid vehicle and other types of like electric like forms of vehicles and entering them into their fleet. And I know that there's monies available. So again, going back to like grant applications, we're looking at like the green communities designation. We just got our charging station down at the Pines. I know that the electric light company is working for the other two locations at 23 School Street and theirs. So that's another way of us to say, hey, we're investing in this infrastructure, please give us a grant so that we can help get emergency vehicles. So having the cruiser as like in talking with Ellen and having like a better understanding of like, financially what makes no sense. If it's a reoccurring expense, it really should be something that we bake into our operating funds, not necessarily something from the capital expenditure side. So they're not the best example, but if you don't think about it like that would be something like, oh, it's on the capital plan, like, oh, that maybe we use X amount or go for a grant for this, and then whatever we can't cover, we can fund it through, other capital means. So it does set that apart, but it's definitely an initiative we're from there. And I know the electric light company has been successful in getting their own grants for some of their vehicles that are hybrid and electrical.
Do we make any money off on the thing?
We don't.
We do.
No, it goes into the system.
It's a
Like-
system that doesn't
Like
pay
it
us
goes
cash.
back to the system of like, the energy that they're paying for, they're paying for. To charge their vehicle, they're not charging like a user fee.
So we don't jack it up like 2% and skim up the top.
My understanding is we don't, I can double check with.
It's like
the
an unmanned gas pump.
It's just a convenient factor. We got a grant. The grant allowed us to put this together. The light department got the contractor, paid them from the grant to have this. And from what I know, they have an app on their phone, and if they're looking for a station, it tells them where they can go, they go. It knows their car or knows whatever, they do whatever they need to do to plug it in or get it. And they pay what the usage of
Yeah.
the thing, and that's what it is. But I, again, would have to ask if there's a user fee.
And the electricity comes from Groveland Electric?
Yes.
Did it? Okay.
And I know the police chief has mentioned looking into the electric vehicles before and the hybrid vehicles and he mentioned it last year, there was some concern about like the batteries and, the stop and go and the running time of the vehicles. It's a little harder on the vehicles. And so there was some, as the technology progresses, there may be opportunity to go that route, but at the time,
I think he got a hybrid, didn't he get a hybrid and kept it as the choose car and didn't put it, rotate it back into the fleet, maybe because of that?
I don't remember the exact.
No,
I just remember that he has said like they've looked
Yeah.
into it and just because of the running time on the vehicles. Like the mileage might be low, but the running time is high.
They should be really how I have a clock. How many hours is that?
Right.
Do they go?
Some of those electric vehicle batteries are not cheap. So,
No, I know the colder the temperature, the less long,
the shorter the running
short the
time.
job, yeah. Did Alex fall asleep on him? I want to make sure he's still there.
Taking it all in.
the roofs next year give me a stomach ache, but that's all right, we'll worry about that next year. I would just say that this is a fantastic document, and it's clear and it's concise, and the graphs, the first half of it documents a lot that is just helpful reference and documentation for us to have. But then the summary of what has happened over time, the summary of the ARPA funds. It's just so helpful to have this stepped back, bigger picture perspective to review. And then to also have the, what has been spent and what's going forward. And I would just encourage anybody to access the document and review it. It's really helpful.
I think it's helpful too, because you see people say like, oh, well, where's our money going? We're not doing anything with our money, but this really gives you. The insight into how it is. Being spent, yes, it's not a line item on the budget that you can see, but I mean, we're. Laying out in this document where those funds are going. And what we're doing with the grants that we get, that otherwise we would be trying to fund. Through our budget, that,
A lot of people only notice that when we drive Santa Claus around in the new truck though. We don't make enough of a big deal when we spend money like this and, 2 to 1.
I think, again, they don't see it. So, upgrading,
Obviously,
the water fountains at the back down. The only people who see that are the people who are in the back. But when you put it on a piece of paper that, the drinking water for the kids at the back down, no longer contains the lead. Like, now everyone can see. Like, that's where we put that money.
Connects the dots.
Right.
The ATV is potentially. We potentially could be grant funded again in the future.
100%. And it's not it's a priority, don't get us wrong, like it's something we need, but it's not necessarily something we need right away, because we have to understand too, that the trail was built to withstand national grid infrastructure, so, things. Can be removed and a big truck can get down there so that they can do their clearing and fix their wires, and we can get a truck down, not a truck, well, we can get like a cruiser down there, but is it ideal? No, we would rather have something that's a little bit more, exactly, but there's no inherent risk to safety or anything of that nature, just something that we should
So
have
we
now.
can have it in the awareness by the time keep and. There's a labor involved, isn't it?
It was Call it that.
Big love, big love. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank
What
you.
a, yes, I love it.
So the next item on the agenda is the PRSD budget. I don't know if there's any, it's still early in the season for them, but I know you guys are meeting regularly to talk through, so.
So we had our monthly meeting that I had with the superintendent, the Johnson Senior as the facility side of things, and then Suzanne Wallace, the new business manager, taking over for Greg and Brett. And again, like you had just said, it was very early on in the process. So they're still, trying to wait and see what they're getting for numbers from the state, and what their estimates are. One of the encouraging things was that they didn't anticipate there to be anything unforeseen that would be coming out, like, when we had the OSD and the OSD went up 14%, that was a huge hit. She had mentioned that she wasn't entirely sure whether or not this was the final figure, but they were looking at something on the lines of like 4.9% for OSD increase this year, which is a little bit manageable than.
I still think that's absolutely absurd and not acceptable on the heels of a 14% increase. Can't they get it under control for the next year and let everybody try to get their feet back on the ground?
So she didn't give me a final, is that that's what it was, but in beginning conversations, because it looked like it, but otherwise she didn't say that they were currently anticipating there to be any unforeseen circumstances that would drive their budget anymore as it had in the last 2 years. I know that at that very meeting, myself, the town administrator, and Merrimack and town manager and with Newbury all said, well, does that mean that we're gonna stay within a 2 to 2.5% increase as the boards have requested prior years? I didn't get an answer yet, but it was not like it was like well, that's good. You know what I mean? So I felt promising in that regard, but as you just said, it's so early in the process, we really don't know exactly what we're gonna get at that point in time, but it didn't look like from the Kentucky side of things, there was anything to be concerned about.
There's no red flag coming out.
No red flags.
4.9.
Again, I don't know if that's 100%, that was just the number she used, but I mean, that's a lot more easy to swallow than 14%.
But yeah,
And it could be less. It could be-
again, over the course
Oh,
of
no,
time,
thank
we
you.
do this. And then we have to have this huge override to bring the gap back together. And then we do this again. And then we have an override, and we do this again. You know, with a school that has diminishing enrollment,
That's
what's,
on us, though. That's designed by us. The diminishing enrollment is completely controlled by Kentucky. That's because they exited the school choice program, and that's why enrollment is down.
But what I'm saying is, if enrollment is down, why do we keep adding staff?
Let's not move it on this.
That would keep them under 2%.
Alex, do you have anything? Are you good? I don't want to move on without checking with you.
No, I'm fine.
So then the next item is the Whittier Regional Vocational School Building Project. We all know that most communities are not happy with this.
This is 5%, this is delusional. Where are you gonna get 5% in today's economy? Estimate annual debt service 30 years at 5%.
They use Hilltop Securities, which we use, and I feel very confident with their projections. I mean, you talk to them more than I do, but that's what they had said to us when we were looking at potentially borrowing, and that's what we've heard from a couple of others, so. I don't know, it could change, obviously the market's the market, but that seems to be what they're advising.
They start selling it.
I think that they're not expecting to borrow it all right away. And yet they think that rates will recommend.
Well, that's what we found out when Greg thought he could borrow all the money at once for the school project. That's not how it works. You borrow as you complete.
As you read it.
So. It's a tough business.
So I guess like the concern that I have, obviously, I mean, they seem to be pretty clear. There's an override for a new building, or there's a very big repair bill that is going to hurt just as much. And my concern is you have these 11 communities. How in tune all of the residents are to this. To come out to a meeting in the middle of January. Between 11 and I think not even 7, like some, random window of time, no early voting, no. We've talked to people who are like, what about the building project? Like, they just don't know about it. And I'm concerned with the full majority vote versus a community vote. That this is. A big,
I'm concerned about absolutely everything about this in this project. I'm concerned about, like you said, people's awareness and ability to speak their voice, but also that we have a decision between two bad choices, which are a new building or a very expensive 75% renovation. But thirdly, the concern is that we are a minority of the vote. So our vote really doesn't seem to matter, yet if the project passes, we need to get funding for it, which we don't have. And that's going to require an override, which is going to upset the residents, rightly so. But we need that override or it's going to, again, dismantle our day-to-day government. So we're just, again, stuck between a rock and a hard place and have bad choices being pushed at us. And I don't know where to come out on it. I really, honestly, don't. I don't think there's a good solution. I don't think that there's, I feel like this board, it's really important that we have guidance, we have say, we have an opinion, but I don't know what that is because there's no good choices here. All I can say is that I would really request that residents be informed. And I know that I think the town administrator is putting information out, publishing information for people to a summary to understand the issue and to vote what you think is best for the community. And I think that's the best we can do. The best we can do is to say, this is a great big deal.
Yeah, I mean, considering the amount of publicity that we did, or more appropriately, the We Are Pentucket committee did for our middle high school. I mean, this is almost like, hey, we gotta shove this under the rug and pass it before anybody gets wind of it. Because this is very, very costly, no matter how you look at it. And it seems so untransparent, so shady. Why don't they have the voting in the basement of a library on Saturday afternoon? In Worcester. I mean, there's no way. There's no way there. I can't believe this doesn't violate some section of the law somewhere, some statute. Because this just seems so downright unscrupulous.
I think the biggest thing that was really telling about the situation that we're currently in is that, once the communities did get a better understanding of where we stood from a financial perspective, and then once we heard from the superintendent about how it would just be even more costly if they went through the capital aspect of things, a lot of questions came into play, like, when did the building committee ever look at, minimal, like Pentucket did, minimizing the cost of the project and, excluding certain pieces of the project and maybe waiting to do certain things, or, downsizing certain things. Like in Pentucket, we didn't do the administration building, so that saved about $3 million from what we had to go out for, and, didn't become a burden on the town. Like, those were taken into consideration. Was there any thought process as to moving the school from a different location? So if they have a long access road in Haverhill, and they have a wastewater treatment facility that they need, have you explored other vacant parcels that gives you the sewer and whatnot that would cut your costs down? Like, were any of those types of situations taken into consideration, or was it just a repair rebuild? And the all of that kind of was discussed, and then so letters were sent, concerns were voiced, and they went to the school committee, and the school committee, they went to the MSBA, and the MSBA said, and they put it forward, and then they went to the school committee, the Whittier School Committee, and the Whittier School Committee still put it forward for a vote. So there were times for public comment, public officials showed up, the senator had showed up from our area, I know the representatives from our area had given testimony, and it doesn't seem like any of that really factored in. I was told that the lieutenant governor was made aware of the situation, but there was really no. The MSBA continued to move forward, and the school committee continued to move forward, and it was those efforts and those concerns and those questions on both pieces.
Expressing the concern and the worry and we can't afford this. Everyone's just shut down.
And I think the biggest thing for a lot of the administrators as well, there might have been, talking about whether or not there's a lot of validity behind what trade schools do and how they've been able to move forward. It's just, let's slow down the process, give us time to figure out whether or not we can find the money. Let us make sure and secure debt exclusion or something before you make this something where it's going to devastate communities with a failure of a debt exclusion, because that is the only way that we would be able to fund the project moving forward. If it did not pass, then what we would have left, it would be, again, it would devastate the town. So let us find a funding source, or let us advocate for involvement of the state, maybe an earmark, maybe additional funding from the state, eliminate some of the burden on the communities, and that really, again, didn't go anywhere.
Because you know what? They want a shiny new toy. I think I got in the school, we want a shiny new toy too. It's Sigmund Freud, envy.
Hey Rebecca, I remember, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, when we were initially talking about this, I thought the legal agreement was written such that it was a vote of all the individual communities. And if the majority of the communities passed it, it would go forward. Is that not the case? It's just a simple vote?
So originally, we thought that, like Pentucket, all of the communities had to be unanimously in favor in order to move forward with the project. They did find a loophole in that where it just needed to be majority of the voters, so it was found to be legal and they can proceed in that fashion. So it has to be the majority of the voters who show up on January 3rd would need to vote in favor of the project in order for it to move forward. Or a majority of the voters would vote not in favor and it would not move forward, and they would need to start pursuing the capital infrastructure needs that they need in order to bring the building up to compliance.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, but honestly, you just need the 806, not even 867 people.
Yeah.
From Haverhill whose children go there.
You're done.
You need 400 and.
Is,
Wouldn't matter if every other town voted against it.
No.
And
And
then,
then sends 68% of the students and pays for 41.6% of the building.
not that I enjoy even bringing this up, but is there any legal options that we can pursue? To either just to even slow it down?
I mean, that was essentially, to be honest with you, one of the communities that is impacted the most is actually Newburyport. Newburyport only sends about 29 students, but they have like over 2,000 eligible students that are taken into consideration with their proposal. So they're actually paying the second highest from Haverhill, where other communities like Amesbury, who has like 117 students that attend Whittier, are paying far less. So I know that the mayor has been very vocal. He's written a bunch of op-ed opinions, has gone to every single meeting, the MSBA meetings, the school committee meetings, the public engagement meetings. And they've talked to the town council on multiple occasions, and we have not been able to find, I mean, he has not been able to find through his efforts any legal not loophole, but any legal proceedings that he could, pursue to see whether or not he could stall it or stop it.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you, when you have to put the police and the fire and the trash, that will be stormed. Wrong word. We'll be walking over to the Beacon Hill asking legislators, how do you expect us to pay for this? Where does it come from? And then maybe the next.
Yeah, I bet they won't have an answer.
Then they probably won't, and at that point, you know what, you need to change who we're asking the questions to.
And it will be a problem that we'll have to continue to pursue for the next 30 years. Because if we are forced to move forward with something of that nature, we have to come up with that debt payment.
There'll be 3 or 4 towns that won't exist 30 years from now with this debt. That's a fact.
I agree with you, and I was told, I said in one of the meetings that I attended, I was like, there's no way that they can, the state would allow that to happen, not just one community getting in their own way, not allowing one of their, like a school in their community to get what they need, but the state's gonna end up, having to intervene in some way, shape or form if something's not done, and
multiple.
Yes.
and that's what I said.
There will be ghost towns. They'll move to New Hampshire, they'll move out of these towns and cities, and they'll be ghost towns.
They won't be able
And
to
then-
afford to move though, that's the problem, because their housing will be worth far less than what it's worth today. Because the housing market in these towns, these communities will not,
Plummet.
they'll plummet. If you don't have fire, you don't have police, you don't have
You know, basic
basic
civil service.
things that
that
Period.
make your town run.
Right.
And then the state will have to step in and pay for all the rest of this because there'll be no taxpayers left in some of these towns to do it on their own. Brilliant. These guys are brilliant, I gotta tell you. Mathematics is not their strong suit, I gotta be honest with you.
But vote no doesn't make it all go away.
Yeah,
No,
what's the
those-
option if, let's say, how much would we owe if they just repair it? Like, it kind of what you were saying earlier, that there's no real good option here, I feel like.
Well, isn't it, and there's just rounded numbers, it's like 445 million for a new school.
Yeah,
They threw out something like 300 million.
It's 515, 293 for the new, so if you said 75% was the cost to rehab it, you're looking at 386 million.
But they don't get any of the MSBA, so is that?
Yeah.
So they did an order of magnitude cost comparison for the code versus the new school. And they said that the code compliancy upgrade was 10+ years for the project duration, anticipated project cost 364 million, anticipated state reimbursement 0, anticipated district share 364. A new school was 3 to 4 years for project duration, anticipated cost was 445 million. And then the anticipated state reimbursement was 181 million for an anticipated district share of 264 million.
So the new school would be less.
That's what it would cost.
Yeah.
So, upgrades. And then when they talked about, what if the vote fails, they said the district will have to move forward with code upgrades immediately. They said that the wastewater treatment plant is estimated at $11,700,000. The sprinkler suppression system is estimated at $12,100,000, and the access road is at $11,400,000. And then
Why don't they do it? What's that just
so there's
saying?
only one access into the building. And that's again, goes back to the whole building project. Did they discuss alternative locations that would have been more feasible to give them a project that didn't request
We
it?
didn't need $12 million for a road.
Because they still need to do a second access road if they do a brand new school there. Build a new building that doesn't take care of your access. So need an additional access road.
I mean,
Takes the sprinkler system, but it doesn't take care of your wastewater treatment plant, and it doesn't take care of your access road.
not that I endorse what I'm about to ask is, what if you just don't pay them?
I've said that,
What
I've
if,
said that in Kentucky a couple of times, believe me, don't send them a check, see what happens, that's all.
I'm looking at these percentages, right? And you have all these towns that can't be happy, right? What if we just kind of unionized and said, we're not gonna pay you? Like, go pound sand. And like, I say that jokingly, but kind of not jokingly, like, what are the repercussions?
Certainly they can probably sue us. But like, that's the thing, like, I've been doing like a lot of reading of like the Mass Journal of laws and like we all have to like, they're just like regular operating budget. It's like the schools have to operate within the budget that the towns allocate. But I feel like we're constantly being told, you have to pay the amount we're telling you.
Yeah,
It's like, it's backwards.
Mhm.
We're not able to say like, this is the budget we can afford to operate.
Here's the
Alright.
money,
And
you
then,
figure it out.
But that also applies to like Pentucket. If Pentucket was just Groveland's high school, middle school, whatever, you would have much more control over their budget, but you don't because you have to go through an assessment process because you're in that regional. And that's what's happening here. Any type of regional type school, you don't have as much flexibility with your budget because you share that budget and a percentage of that budget with multiple other communities. So that's the difference too.
But it goes back to the last year where like, if 2 towns approve it, then we don't care about the 3rd town, whether they can afford it or not. If they have to go bankrupt, we'll let them go bankrupt, whatever, no big deal. And it just, again, it's like, goes back to the, we don't care if you can afford it. This is what we're doing. Figure it out.
We had the same problem when we built the school. The MSBA said, this is how big you build it. For every square foot you go over this, you own it, 100%. We're not paying for it. And at the same time, they said this 40B going over here and the 40B going over there. Well, that's gonna increase the student population every time. Deal with it. Figure it out. Two sides of their mouth are talking two different sides of the story when you talk to the state. They tell us exactly how much to build the school, but then when you have to deal with an increased population, well, you deal with it. You don't want to talk about it. How do you do that? How do you deal with mandates that the state passes down to the school and never fully funds? For example, great example is transportation costs. One of the great selling points when we regionalized was, we're gonna reimburse you 100% of your transportation costs. Don't worry. That has never, ever happened. Ever. So, I mean, even if they promised us half the money, the check would bounce. I don't know. They pass laws, but they don't enforce them. They don't. I don't know. This is going to be a tremendous hardship on a number of communities, no matter what they do. Even if I figure it at same percentage to the 515 million, if they went to the repair at 364 million, like you said, our net would still be 15,328,000 plus. And that's over 10 years, right? Instead of 30. And I bet you're not getting 5% at that point.
There's no way.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, like, it's,
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, I know that's kind of outlandish, but these numbers are obviously just big. Other communities can't be, they're probably just as happy as we are. And I was wondering, I know that they could probably pursue legal avenues, but I'm wondering if there was any specific clauses within the legal agreement where it's like, okay, well, you don't pay, all right, we kick you out or whatever. That's what I was just wondering.
Good question.
Yeah, I think that is a good question, and I think that's what we need to understand more of. If it passes and if we get,
some communities say, nope, can't do it.
or if we get a bill that we don't approve an override for, and it's gonna, I mean,
What can they do?
then do we have any recourse? But when is our next meeting? Do we have one before? We must have one.
January,
No, I don't think
No.
so.
the next meeting is January 17th,
And their meeting is,
so it's before that.
It is, but it's the 23rd, no?
The more than the Jan, you can go.
So
23rd, 7 to 11 to 7.
but not like we can. I just thought it was important that we talk about the issues, address the issues for our community, even though it's complicated and there's not really a recommendation or resolution or any direction of what's presented to us.
no, but I think it's a good point. People ought to know what's coming out of the left field. It's big, it's coming fast, and it's gonna hurt.
It's horrible.
I know. I mean, talk about the Grinch.
Is there any, just so folks in our town know, which I feel like a good portion of people already kind of saw this coming, but like just some signs with like a website on it, posted on the side of the road on like 97 or like Main Street. Just so when folks drive by, probably coming home from work, they're like, oh man, this is something I should probably check out. Link it to a website, maybe on our town or a relevant article, so they understand, when the vote is and what's going on. Kind of how we have that electric sign outside of town hall, kind of advertising what's going on with the town.
if we could unify the other towns in our same predicament to, lobby to get to the polls that day and vote no, we might have a chance to outnumber, one city, which is April, but I don't know what the odds are of that.
No, I mean, and just to let folks within our own town know what's on the horizon.
So I'll put it on the electrical, the digital board out front. I know that I had, the town clerk had just shared with us the, sample ballot, so I had been working today on getting a little post out on our social media pages and up on the website. And then we're creating like a page for the information about the poll as well. So we can find it easily on our website. The other signs are a little harder because we don't own one of those digital signs. When we use them, we usually use it for another community. But the other option is we can do a code red call too, and put that out to anybody who subscribes. I think that the issue though that we find with code red is that we have a couple of residents who don't believe that we should be utilizing it for anything other than emergencies, such as in person or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we tend not to use it from the administration side about information about town meeting and stuff because we've gotten a lot of bad feedback. But that's the only other mechanism I can think that will directly reach individuals. I know Ellen had mentioned maybe potentially checking in with the treasurer collector and seeing if we can put anything in the tax bill. I'm not sure whether or not we can, because I know there's specific legislative laws about what you can include with your tax bill, like you can do something about the trash, but I remember when we did that, that was fine about the barrel limit, but I remember there being other stipulations, but that might be an option too, and they're supposed to be going out shortly, so we'll explore whether or not we can put any notification in the tax bill. If we can, we can do that, but again, if we can't, then obviously we will have to try and find other ways, but we can definitely try anything that you propose and would work to do so, because obviously we want to get the word out no matter what, so people at least get an opportunity to vote how they see fit.
Yeah, I mean, or we could do like a little infogram and just drop it in the town crier, the Facebook group, and just let people read it and spread. I mean,
There's not a good no vote.
yeah, no, there's, yeah,
There's no good
There's no
outcome.
good vote. So that's the part that I personally struggle with, because I'm like, yes, vote yes, get the new school, it's cheaper than the repairs. But we can't afford the yes
yeah,
vote either. So, like, I want people to be informed, to know about it, because there are people who don't have any idea about it, so. But I'm just, there's no
Yeah.
good,
there's no good, yeah, there's no good solution.
like, yes, I would prefer the cheaper amount that would give the students that go there the new school. But also, how do we then find the money for it? And I think that's the part where I struggled the most is there was no option to find the funding before we had to say, let's do option A or option B.
Yeah, I wouldn't even, I think the reason why I bring it up just is for transparency, to just let them know that this is happening, which I'm sure most already do, but just to give them an idea of this is what's coming down the wire, this is how much it's gonna cost. And like you're saying, Melissa, there's no, in my opinion, real win in this. It's just kind of giving everyone a heads up. Unless,
Not to interrupt, but I completely agree, like, I want people to be informed about it.
yeah,
But again, like, I'm like, either way, then now we have something coming up in April that will be a hard sell. Ask for any type of override, anything, because we just did one last year to just operate one regional school, and we just did one 5 years ago to build our own another regional school, so 20. No, it's
is the agreement terribly complicated? Like, could I do like a control? Oh, I think I asked you this. It's not in PDF, is it?
Typewriter,
What was that?
isn't it a typewriter, like it's
Yeah, okay.
version, but then you could search for it.
Yeah,
Is it legal to do, like, so. On a vote had to be very clear, like you're voting yes for a new school or no for a new school. And then you're voting yes to rehab the school or no, but not yes for a new school or no means you're still spending.
I don't remember how we did the vote here. But really, I think when we presented it is $95 million to rehab two existing buildings. 100% paid for by the three towns, or 144 million for one new school. 40% paid for by the state. It became an easy kind of option.
Yeah, but it was still one like question.
Yeah. This is so much different because the numbers are just so wildly
Yeah,
greater.
This is,
strange to me.
yeah, do you approve of the vote? Of 444,613,813 dollars. And then it just says voted.
Like, I understand like there's these repair courses that have to happen, because I know. The city of Haverhill has said, you're not getting another building permit. From us without having a working sprinkler, without having, this other stuff. But
And when you do that, you're automatically not ADA compliant anymore. That's what we found over here. We would have to blow out all the hallways and make them bigger. And imagine blowing out all the hallways in those old buildings to make them bigger. Just, this is
I mean, the hallways aren't small there,
it's small there either, but it's amazing.
very large hallways.
It's also just kind of funny the way the warrant reads, because, Amesbury had, you vote at the high school, Georgetown, you vote at the Pembroke School, Groveland, you vote at the town hall. Haverhill, you vote at Somebody Cares, the Citizen Center, the Haverhill High School, the Hunting School, Bradford Elementary, Moody School, the Public Library, the Universalist Unitarian Church, the Nettle Middle School, Northern Essex Community College, the Kennedy Community Center, the Steel Community Room. I mean, and there's like a half a dozen more.
So if just
And
one
so does
person
that
went to
mean-
the location, we lose some.
It's a good question, like, the vote is to approve the new school, but then how are they gonna come back?
We have to.
We have no school that day
They would have to cancel school.
because it's a Tuesday. They must have no school, which also makes it easier for them to arrive at the polls. I suppose we could have canceled school, but we don't because our voting is at the town hall.
But they would
Sometimes
have to,
school will have it in the gym and they'll still have school. I remember they used to set up their voting machines in like the cafeteria, the auditorium. They still have school.
I don't know if they can do that in schools today. I don't know that they can have public coming and going.
the schools are locked down now.
This is true. There's a lot
Yeah,
different when I
it's
was
a
a
good
kid.
question, like, yes, we vote,
So we.
No
if it
for
gets
the
voted
new
no for the new
school.
school, don't they have to come back with another vote for us to do all the upgrades and repairs?
or can they
Yes.
just assess it to us?
Yeah, or is it just a done deal at that point?
Well, they don't have to get
If
the
it's
capital.
not, it's not an operating, is it?
Well, just that we have the capital assessments that we have.
They would just slap us with it.
With an assessment.
So why can't they slap us with a kind of assessment from the school because it's only building?
Because the MSBA requires them to get,
Because they're gonna get.
Because they're gonna get money.
They're right. Getting matching funds.
I would imagine, we have, they have, but they have given us capital assessment before as part of the operating side, they're just much smaller, they've never done that large. So my assumption, and I should double check on that, like you said, it makes a lot of sense, but my assumption is based upon the fact that it's the MSBA
That's right.
requirement, that's why we need to go for the vote.
A no vote would just
Kill the project.
kill the
MSP.
project, kill the new school with state funding. And then
State
they're
doesn't
just
care.
gonna send through whatever repair they need to do on a given,
On a capital
on a
assessment.
capital
And does our
assessment. uh,
agreement give us any pushback at all on that?
And then you
Kind of
don't have
different,
any-
right, like the
any
regional
recourse.
ODR agreement?
No, if they just give you the terminology in terms of the difference of percentage versus enrollment versus what you have there. But I
It doesn't
believe,
say anything about assessments in it, like Kentucky, I think it says something. About how we have a little bit of say in what they. It's supposed to be a conversation back and forth and what they assess us, is the, what is the video one say? Cause that's a little bit of a different agreement.
No,
It's just, we just like, okay,
It's a-
send us.
outdated or type of.
it was done in 1957 and it hasn't been touched since.
1957.
I mean, technically Boxford is signed on the agreement as well, and they're no longer part of the video school.
I heard somewhere they
So
never
I have to-
actually joined. They actually like backed out or actually.
Do we have a signed document that's the fully executed document that we are a member of that?
So I have Havel, Newburyport, Amesbury, Boxford, Georgetown, Groveland, Ipswich, Merrimack, Newbury, Raleigh, Salisbury, and West Newbury.
Who signed on behalf of Groveland?
It's like a letter.
The signatures?
It's just
It's like,
signatures.
I don't know, I couldn't tell you.
Someone from 1960.
And I apologize, 1967.
1967. I wonder if we could challenge the signatures.
That's more.
60-year-old buildings. Oxford had 200 seats available and had to pay for them, even though they didn't have part of it.
Because I feel like I read a news article somewhere that said they were going to join, but never actually joined. Something, I could be, wrong, but it's a lot of news articles.
Sad part is, nobody's looked at that document and
A long time.
Well, Havel probably did.
Yeah.
We did, somebody did.
the rest of us towns sat there since 1967 with the same agreement, never thinking that
It works.
this is probably needs to be updated every now and then, maybe, once every
I
decade.
think, but also too, like, think about the fact we said when Essex had did their new building, they did it based on actual student attendance, not this student population when you're looking at 1,200 kids versus 20,000 kids. That's the big issue at hand, really. That's why Newburyport's looking at spending, $1 million for every kid that have a vote ballot.
I know.
Which is says capital cost shall be apportioned annually in December for the ensuing calendar year on the basis of pupil enrollment as here and after defined, and it goes to how we said it's on eligible students or whatever. This is capital cost represented by debt service shall be apportioned as a capital cost of the year in which the debt service falls due.
Send that.
Yeah.
I want to read through it.
Yeah, be interesting.
I can share it with everybody. Okay. Don't know, again, no. Nothing really, just other than to talk about. What's going on and
Transparency.
transparency in terms of. What we're being handed. The next item on the list. Town administrator updates. I don't know that you have anything additional than what we've talked about because
Well,
I do try to touch base with you before the meetings.
Yeah,
so.
there wasn't much. I just wanted to give you an understanding of kind of where we were and like an estimated standpoint with like the budget and everything. So the budget books had gone. The budget was, requests had gone out. They were due on the 15th. They submitted their budgets for you, ClearGov. Once I got the budgets, I closed out the budgets and we issued the budget books. Right now, the departments are going through and they're putting in their narratives, their mission, their goals, and they're putting in that all updated in the budget book. Once that's completed, the first week of January, my goal is to then send that out to you and then put it on the website. So now everybody has a copy of the budget book that has before you. And then we'll start to review and initiate, comments and whatnot. For a lot of the information for myself, it's a lot of like estimated data because I just don't have the information at this point in time. I don't have the Essex County retirement information that wasn't done. I automatically assumed a 6% increase in the insurance costs for, the GIC because that's kind of standard of what we've seen in the past. For the property casualty and professional liability insurance, I didn't realize that we did this, but I'm glad that we did. Is that, last year, we were able to be awarded a 2-year rate guarantee. So there will be a 0% increase this year and a maximum of 2.5% next year. But that does not include, obviously, with the caveat, the workers' compensation portion and the injured on duty, police officers, as well as any, claims deductible, new vehicles or new buildings. So they're still presenting us to, or recommending that we put an additional 5% on what we currently had last year. The only other ones that are more set in stone was the trash budget. Taking a look at the waste management contract that we have for July 1st, 2024 to June 30, 2025. We'll be providing $542,000 per year. And the MSW disposable rate per ton will be $95. The average trash invoice for FY24 has been about $54,941. So it's going to be a much larger increase. And then we also have our contract that stipulates that there'll be a 3% increase on the company fee, residue fee, and excess contamination fee. And that will also cause our line item to increase. So right now I'm looking at about $820,000 estimated for the trash budget. So that's a big jump on our expenditure side. And then from the revenue side, we're not really looking too great. Not looking awful, but we're gonna run into, some tight times. We really only have the 2.5% that we have over last year. New growth was much lower than we anticipated for fiscal year 24. So being mindful of that and being mindful of the building permits that have been filled and the developments that we see coming up and the time frame in which we can collect new growth for the next fiscal year. We're really only proposing a 2% increase over new growth from last fiscal year. And that's actually a little bit more riskier based upon what we're seeing. We do have a larger development that's coming in play that did pull their building permit. They haven't been issued their building permit yet, but they have started to pull their permits. But the amount of growth that we'll capture from the beginning portion of the development are so minimal that it's not really going to add too much to our new growth. So we will see some new growth, but it might not be as much as we anticipate. And I don't necessarily want to over budget that line. Then we're looking at local receipts, the same that applied for motor vehicle excise tax. We're looking at level funding that. We're bringing in a little bit more than what we estimated last fiscal year. But it does split fiscal years, so it does get a little bit confusing in trying to figure out exactly what we would be able to bring in, but to be conservative, we level funded. The other local receipts are about essentially the same, and not looking for much of an increase there. State aid, we're just predicting, I believe the state hasn't really kind of talked much about it. They've been pretty consistent with giving us a 3% increase the last 2 years. So I didn't, again, want to make an over assumption. So I did a 2.5. And then we're also thinking that they'll give another increase to state owned land because the new administration has put a big emphasis on that. So we put another 2.5% on that. All the other accounts that we kind of draw from for other financial sources are still kind of looking the same, the light intergovernmental light transfer, the following premiums, the transfer from the conservation fund, the overlay surplus, the free cash allocation to OPEB. So we're really looking at the revenues coming in right now from a very preliminary estimate of about 23,391,732. And based upon what was submitted by the departments, the total budget allocation or expenditure proposed was the 23,513,321. So we're already out of budget without having to take into consideration the final numbers from the Essex County Retirement System, the insurance, the Kentucky Regional School, Whittier, Essex Tech, and some of those larger items that we see kind of shifting the budget. So it's still, again, really early in the process, but those are some of the initial figures. And then just in terms of background, we are looking to do what we have standardly done for some of our other accounts. We are looking to put a $50,000 contribution to this town stabilization fund, a $50,000 contribution to the capital stabilization fund, the 85,000 like we just talked about for OPEB. And then we are looking at some of the other standard articles that we put forward. The MS4 is essentially nearing its absolute completion to some extent. So we're looking to withdraw a lot more from that account. So we're only looking to add maybe like $2,000 this year just to keep the consultant on board. We actually changed the consultant, so we're using the regional planning agency, which is saving us a lot of money as well. So that line that we typically fund at like 25 or 20,000 will be dropped down. But we also have the sick buyback. We want to keep on trying to put monies towards that. We don't anticipate anybody retiring this year, but we do anticipate there might be some in the near future and want to make sure that we're not depleting that account and, you know, putting ourselves at a disadvantage. Then we have the opioid settlement suit. We did just figure out that the state passed legislation that's going to allow us to create a special revenue fund, which would be great. Right now, it's in the undesignated fund, and when that happens, we have to make sure that that gets removed from the undesignated fund, which is in the form of a warrant article. So the $4,000 from the free cash needs to be set aside to account for the monies that they have given us. Correct? So yeah, right. Okay.
But we now we can move it aside to special revenue. Instead of creating an appropriation and then having to create an appropriation every time we get money. Now it doesn't need to be appropriated, we just
You
need
can
to
just
spend
go
it on
into
allowable, and just can just get appropriated and then. And we're still
Super.
on 1 year of a warrant article to move what we've already received.
And we're really excited because we're working with the police department on, with the DARE program and looking at ways that they've enhanced their program to include opioid type of, education materials and how we can use those monies to help support their efforts. And I just had them say it was very productive, so we're really looking forward to that. And then I don't believe that there's any other items that I can think of off the top of my head. I don't have it in my notes, but that we're looking for utilizing free cash towards for supplementing those efforts. But I mean, everything seems to be, again, business as usual, other than the new growth factor not coming in as I had in some of the other years.
What's the anticipated shortfall right now? I mean, preliminary.
So it's. So the revenue's at 23,391,732. With the general fund. I mean, the expenditure line. I think we do this.
So you're gonna make me do math.
Like 200. Once,
It's $121,000. Essentially, $121,590.
Short right now.
Yes.
So the other numbers that you said. Essex. County retirement, whatever, those are plugged. Those
They're, I estimated increases, but they're not like, they could be too high, they could be too low. Like in Essex and Essex Tech and Whittier are the worst to budget for because it's not like Pentucket where they can give me an assessment. I have to say, okay, we have X amount of students there. If you do the breakdown of like how much our assessment is and you divide it by the amount of students, you get, okay, this is our cost per student. You take that and then you say, okay, we have this many students, maybe I'll add 2 more because it looks like we have 3 in 12th grade and they'll be graduating, so they'll
Yeah.
probably take another 3. But then, like Essex Tech, we did that last year and they didn't, and now we under budgeted and now we'll be short and we need to cover that. But then there's been years where we over budget that and there hasn't been, Whittier didn't take that many students in their freshman class, but they just lost 11. So then we went from like $800,000 down to $600,000, and it jumps so infrequently, and I don't know the chapter 70, and I don't know the regional cost, which also play into what they're charging us per tuition for the students. Where again, Kentucky's so much easier, it might not like the numbers, but this is your number.
It is.
So that part has been real. I made assumptions with the retirement, they could be high, they could be low, so it's.
But they're plugged in there. They're in there and there's a reason. It's not like they're just level funded.
Yes, I tried to play with them a little bit to see what we got. And that's assuming the 2% increase, the cost of living increase for the employees, except for the employees that are contractual or the ones that we have discussed, like the assistant treasurer collector, we needed to add the $2,000 to her salary line item. The assistant treasurer, the assistant clerk was another one that had wanted to take the $2,000 from one salary and move it to another, so we honored their request to take one monies from another salary and put it to another salary. And then there was another one that we had talked about increasing and we couldn't bring it on operation budget and hired. So we said that we would do it towards the comp for the first time, and then the second year we would try and get the full salary into the operation budget, but that's it, not necessarily going above and beyond or doing any increases other than that. So those are the only salaries that have been adjusted over the 2%, so those just those three positions. And that was the assistant director of the COA. So the assistant treasurer collector, the assistant clerk, and the assistant director. in the COA. And we still have not negotiated the contracts for the highway waivers and water and sewer, but we are planning to begin the discussions in January.
When you think those contracts up,
July 1, June 30. Yes. But those are just a little, so those are just a little bit of the, the numbers I wanted to give you, just so that you understand where we are and your preparation. Once everybody submits their stuff again by December 31st, I really do hope to get the budget book over to you. It will be preliminary. I'm really hoping that it will be something that we can utilize more functionally with the ClearGov software. It's my first time kind of using it for this purpose, but like I can create other budgets. So as we start to have conversations and we start to move things around, like the budget book and the material that the members submitted will remain the same. It can be updated if we want them to update it. But as soon as we create a new budget, I can pull those numbers into the budget book. And so you'll be seeing those real numbers. So if you decide that, okay, so-and-so has a fuel budget of this and we are all in agreement, we want this budget to be locked, we can lock it, and then moving forward, you'll see just those approved. So you'll see your approved budget as we go through the process, their requested budget. And then
So that pretty spreadsheet we have, that's like, this is what they requested, here's what got approved, here's what got approved, that will formulate on its own
exactly.
as we go through the process.
So you'll be able to see that, and all of the information that the departments are providing are being provided specifically from the departments. So they can update it with the conversations and we can see that. So we'll see what happens, but other than that update, I don't have anything, other than to, inform the board that we received a $95,000 grant to, pursue, zoning and subdivision rules and regulation, updates, per the latest housing, mandate, or housing production plan mandate, not necessarily production of units, but plan that must allow for certain housing under the MBTA zoning, GA zoning. And then just also trying to be mindful of the fact that we do have an aging population, and a lot of the aging population in Groveland wants to stay in Groveland, but they do not want to live in their 4-bedroom houses. They would like other options that are not Whitestone. They would like other options that are not Nichols Village. They would like an option to downsize here in town. And we're also taking the opportunity to take a little closer look at our zoning to see whether or not there's other housing opportunities that we can provide in different areas that will stay within the characteristic of the community, but also provide those different housing options that don't look like apartments and don't look like, again, things that you wouldn't necessarily see. So that's another opportunity to do that with the consultant. So we're excited about that. And we hope to be able to provide more feedback as soon as we get additional information to this board as well.
that study may be made moved by this Whittier thing.
Good.
That's just.
Thank you, Rebecca. The next item on the agenda is just to, plan the next meeting, which based on the calendar we had put out previously. The next meeting would be January 17th at 5 p.m. Because that would be the first round of budget, meetings where we would have the town clerk, police, emergency management, fire department, the board of assessors, and then depending on the time, if there were any updates to your budgets. So I don't know in the past if you've sent out the dates and times, if you want me to draft something and send it to you to forward, or,
So I have sent out that list that you've given me already as part of your budget packet. Most individuals will take it and they will put it in the calendar, but I do have a couple of employees that do not take that initiative, so it's at your discretion. If you would like me to send out a calendar invite to people the week before, or like the beginning of whatever, like to just kind of be like, this is a reminder. You should already know because it was sent to you. And we said you would typically have a meeting with the board, but I'll give you a week reminder to let you know that it's coming up, so whatever.
okay, yeah, I'll shoot you an email. Maybe a little bit before a week.
When did you say that was January?
January 17th. 5 o'clock.
Seems very good use of a lot of their marijuana money.
I'm sure that will definitely come to aid in their
Yeah,
financial.
like we didn't have kind of that forward kind of thinking years ago.
All right, so then the next is just any other items not reasonably anticipated. I do not have anything.
I sure do not.
Bill,
Pass.
and then Alex, do you have anything?
No,
Okay, so then, we just. Before we do a motion to adjourn, I just want to wish everyone happy holiday, happy new year. Holiday season, got rested.
Yeah. Big thank you to all the employees of the town that work so hard. Doing what they do that lets us do what we do. Enjoy our lives. So special thanks to all you first responders and all the other people in town that keep it running. Appreciate all your hard work. And oh, when does Santa come by? I know a couple of weeks ago I saw some clown on the back of a trailer or something, but that can't be Santa Claus. I mean, we got a real one coming around. Again, the next day when?
He just goes from the Bagnell School to the town hall, or to the fire station.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh, next year we're gonna have to put together a fund. Yeah,
That's why
you
there
know,
was the one on Saturday, was a
With Mark.
community member putting something together in place of what used to happen.
is it the fuel? Maybe I can start some kind of thing that we can, like fill a boot and then we can fill a big truck with gas and then we can have Santa go all around town like he used to do.
I think the issue was there was a liability concern and the truck couldn't fit down certain roads. But I'm talking out of my wheelhouse, so they're just things that have been said to me in passing, so I would have.
Why
to
do we
get-
buy the truck if it can't go down certain roads and blow? Just asking.
I would need to do some more research to answer that question.
My grandkids were very disappointed they didn't see Santa this year.
I know the PTA did their Polar Express thing, that was, well received, I believe, and Santa was here at Town Hall, and I believe that the library also did an event just this evening, and I believe Santa was in Town Hall as well, so there might be some other options to see Santa, not on the roadway, but maybe in some other locations in around town.
It's like seeing Elvis, you can never see him enough.
It does seem to be a well-loved tradition in the community.
You would not believe the people that complained to me the last couple of years because they didn't see Santa the way it's been typically.
Because he was inside.
He was inside a vehicle and he didn't go down the, the number of roads that they were accustomed to. You know what I mean? They could hear the sirens off in the distance and they waited and they waited. And they waited some more. Then they heard the sirens going away, and then they went home. Same thing never came. The kids cried all the way home, thinking that they were naughty that year. Somebody's not coming.
I stood in the middle of Elm Park and waved to Santa. He came up here. It was a good time. It was a good time.
Okay, that's it. There are
Motion to adjourn at 8:16.
second. Roll call, Alex,
Yep.
Yes,
Bill, Ruth,
Yes.
Melissa, yes.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Don't forget to join FinCom. We need members. Please, please, please.
That's it, yeah.